From unsolved mysteries to unexplained phenomena, from comedy gold to relationship fails, Amazon Music's got the most ad-free top podcasts, included with Prime. Because the only thing that should interrupt your listening is, well, nothing. Download the Amazon Music app today.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise and get to the heart of the stories really shaping things. Today, we're plunging into an event that didn't just cause ripples, it genuinely changed the whole conversation around free speech through the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So this deep dive, it's all about understanding how that terrible event, how it shifted the ground under discussions about political violence, free speech, and, accountability in the U.S. We'll be looking really closely at the reactions, particularly from conservative figures and the Trump administration. We want to compare their past talk about cancel culture with what they actually did after Kirk's death. And, what does that all mean for political discussion?
Yeah, and for this, we've pulled together quite a range of sources. We're looking at AP News, Fox News, Wired, Axios, Government Executive, The Hill, ABC News, The New Republic, plus a lot of social media statements, too. You really need that wide lens, I think, to grapple with the complexities and, frankly, the contradictions that emerged.
Absolutely. So our mission here is to sort of map out these shifts, right? The changes in language, the changes in action around free speech, the sudden rise of doxing, and how political opponents are being treated now. What does it actually tell us about where we are as a country? How tolerant are we really of political differences right now?
Okay, so the immediate aftermath of Charlie Kirk's assassination, it wasn't just grief, was it? It kicked off this rapid, and I have to say, pretty astonishing shift in how free speech was being talked about, especially from the people who, championed it loudest before. For years, conservatives complained quite strongly about cancel culture from the left. But our sources show this really striking reversal. It almost looks like the very tactics they used to criticize are now, being used by them.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How quickly that narrative flipped. The exact methods called cancel culture suddenly became tools weaponized against anyone seen as critical of Kirk or, worse, celebrating his death. This isn't just like a philosophical debate anymore. It feels more like a strategic push for ideological alignment. And we saw some really high-ranking people leading the charge, like Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, right? He went on X demanding American Airlines fire pilots who supposedly celebrated Kirk's death. He called it disgusting. And this wasn't just some random person. This was a cabinet secretary making that demand publicly.
Exactly. And then you had Senator Marsha Blackburn taking it even further. She used social media to call for university staff to be fired, an assistant dean, professors, Middle Tennessee State, Austin Peay, Cumberland University. And they did lose their jobs over comments deemed inappropriate. One professor apparently said, Kirk spoke his fate into existence.
Wow. And this zero tolerance thing, it wasn't just politics or universities. The Pentagon jumped in fast with a policy for military folks. Army Colonel Scott Stevens got suspended for social media posts celebrating Kirk's death. He described Kirk as spreading hate, racism, homophobia, misogyny, and transphobia.
And that crackdown went wide. An Army Reserves major suspended for posting things like, "A monster died today." That confirmed, quote, zero tolerance at the Department of War. Homeland Security acted against at least 3 staffers. One FEMA employee put on leave for an Instagram post criticizing the order to fly flags at half-staff. Even the Coast Guard and Secret Service disciplined people. It really paints a picture of a strategic redefinition of what's acceptable dissent, Political opposition suddenly isn't just something you disagree with. It's framed as this dangerous threat, justifying these immediate career-ending actions. It feels like a fundamental change in how political tolerance is being, enforced.
Okay, but the story doesn't stop there with just the firings and suspensions. What makes this even more complex is the stark contradiction, isn't it? When you look at what these same political figures were saying about free speech before all this happened.
Right. That's the crucial question, isn't it? When do these loud defenses of free speech suddenly get quiet, replaced by calls for punishment? And what's the logic? What criteria are they using? I mean, think about President Trump's executive order literally on his first day back in office. It explicitly prohibited the federal government from, quote, unconstitutionally abridging the free speech of any American citizen.
Yeah, and Vice President J.D. Vance, remember him at the Munich Security Conference? He was really hitting the Biden administration hard for supposedly encouraging private companies to silence people.
Yeah.
He even criticized European countries for censoring political speech. He said, and this is a direct quote, "Under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square, agree or disagree." That sounds pretty absolute, doesn't it? A really strong stance on free expression.
It does. But then, after the assassination, the tune changed dramatically. Vice President Vance, speaking on Kirk's own radio show, was actually encouraging people to, quote, call them out, and, hell, call their employer if they saw someone celebrating Kirk's murder. And President Trump himself threatened to target the radical left. He said his political opponents were, quote, already under major investigation. That definitely raised alarms, fears that he was, trying to silence critics.
Even the State Department got involved in this. Deputy Secretary Christopher Landau told consular officials to take appropriate action against foreigners who were praising, rationalizing, or making light of Kirk's death. And Secretary Marco Rubio confirmed visas would be denied or revoked.
And Attorney General Pam Bondi. Her initial statement was really strong. She threatened to, quote, go after you if you are targeting anyone with hate speech. She even threatened to prosecute Office Depot because an employee refused to print vigil posters. Now, she did clarify later on X, saying, free speech protects ideas, but it does not and will never protect violence, citing things like calling for murder or doxing. But those initial comments, combined with the swift actions elsewhere, it certainly worried civil liberties groups.
Yeah, and that apparent switch didn't go unnoticed. Adam Goldstein from FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, he pointed out that, quote, the only time you're really supporting free speech is when it's unpopular. He specifically noted how government officials getting involved really tests the First Amendment.
And even some conservatives push back. Erickson criticized Bondi's initial hate speech comments. He warned that kind of broad language, quote, will be turned on you the moment Democrats take back power. Speaker Mike Johnson tried to walk a line, I guess. He defended the right to say crazy things, but also said employers could fire people for celebrating murder. It highlights this sort of fuzzy distinction between government action and private action. But it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does this selective application of free speech ideas mean for public debate, for dissent, especially in such a polarized country? Like, where are the lines now, and who gets to decide where they are when the application seems so, inconsistent?
Right. And it wasn't just direct firings or, legal threats. We started seeing this really alarming trend of organized campaigns to identify people, publicly shame them, which is, again, a tactic many on the right had condemned before. What do you think the larger goal is there? Well, connecting it to the bigger picture, it really seems aimed at creating a chilling effect on speech, right? Making the consequences stretch way beyond just your job, deep into your personal life. A prime example is this thing called the Charlie Kirk Data Foundation. It's anonymous, online, and they started crowdsourcing a database of social media users who criticized Kirk or celebrated his death. They claim it's not doxing because technically it's public info, not private details like addresses, but they're making this database searchable by general location, employer, and industry type. The clear purpose is to identify and target people, which, let's be honest, leads to very similar real-world consequences as traditional doxing.
And the warning the group itself puts out is, wow, it's pretty stark. Quote, when they called Charlie Kirk a Nazi or a white nationalist, they mean all 77 million Americans who voted for Trump. They mean you. That means they want to kill you the same way they killed Charlie. Never forget that. That's not just compiling data, is it? That's explicitly framing political disagreement as a life or death battle. Exactly. And you see other influencers jumping in too. Libs of TikTok, run by Chaya Raichik, declared "This is war" and launched doxing campaigns against people perceived as Democrats. And then there's Laura Loomer, the far-right activist. She has a documented history of these pressure campaigns. Sources say they've led to at least 15 Trump administration officials losing their jobs, often through these public social media attacks. She apparently claims direct contact with Trump and gets tips from inside the administration.
The huge danger here, obviously, is when these campaigns just spiral out of control, right? We've seen cases of mistaken identity, where totally innocent people get swept up, like Ali Nasrati, an IT technician. He was wrongly ID'd as someone posting anti-Kirk stuff. He got death threats, his family had to flee, he got suspended from his job. Ryan Fournier, chair of Students for Trump, also had to backtrack after falsely accusing an elementary school teacher. So how do these actions, even if they start with public info, really affect individuals and the general climate for just speaking your mind,
Yeah.
especially when misinformation gets thrown into the mix?
It absolutely creates an environment of fear, doesn't it? And self-censorship. People start thinking twice, maybe three times before saying anything that could possibly be twisted or, weaponized against them. This kind of tactic, it fundamentally changes the public square. It really narrows the range of what feels safe to say.
Okay, so you have this intense focus on critics, you have these doxing campaigns, and it's all happening alongside this major escalation in rhetoric. We're hearing figures on the right blaming the radical left for political violence, even using words like war.
Yeah, our sources really highlight this fascinating and sometimes quite selective framing of political violence during this period. President Trump, for instance, in his speech right after Kirk's death, directly blamed the radical left. He said their demonizing rhetoric was, quote, directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today.
And Trump promised to hunt down those who contributed to this atrocity and also other political violence, including the organizations that fund it and support it. He listed examples he attributed to the radical left, the attempt on his life, a United Healthcare CEO's assassination, attacks on ICE's agents, the 2017 congressional baseball shooting.
But what's really notable there is what wasn't mentioned in Trump's address. There was no mention of political violence from right-wing actors, like the shootings of two Minnesota Democratic lawmakers just that June, or the 2022 attack on Paul Pelosi. January 6th wasn't mentioned, the plot to kidnap Governor Whitmer wasn't mentioned, and, flags weren't lowered for Minnesota State Rep Melissa Hortman's assassination like they were for Kirk. This selective focus really does reinforce a narrative, doesn't it? That violence mainly comes from one side.
And other conservative figures definitely picked up that combative tone, making tensions even higher. Vice President J.D. Vance said, quote, "While our side of the aisle certainly has its crazies, it is a statistical fact that most of the lunatics in American politics today are proud members of the far left."
Right. And then you have conspiracy theorist Alex Jones declaring the left has been saying, put a bullseye on Trump, put a bullseye on his supporters. We're in a war. Steve Bannon called Kirk a casualty of war on his podcast, War Room. Fox News host Jesse Waters asking, they are at war with us. How much political violence are we going to tolerate? This isn't just like strong disagreement anymore. It's framing politics as an actual battle.
Conservative author Kurt Schlichter put it bluntly on X. This situation is fundamentally different because it's very clear that a substantial number of Democrats want to literally murder us. And maybe one of the most extreme examples came from Rep. Clay Higgins. He demanded tech companies ban users forever if they belittled Kirk's death. He threatened their business licenses, blacklisting businesses, kicking them out of schools, revoking driver's licenses. He actually said, "I'm basically going to cancel with extreme prejudice these evil, sick animals who celebrated Charlie Kirk's assassination."
It's quite an escalation, isn't it? I mean, when political talk shifts from debate to calling it war, accusing opponents of wanting to murder you, what are the real-world effects on national unity, on the potential for actual violence? How does that kind of rhetoric shape how people see entire groups? Especially when the blame seems so heavily focused on one side, often ignoring violence from, within your own ranks. It really risks hardening those divisions, making any kind of real conversation almost impossible.
So we've really traced a rapid and pretty deep transformation here. How free speech, how political opposition are being handled in the time since Charlie Kirk's death. From these swift punishments for critics to broad threats of prosecution to these organized doxing campaigns, the words and actions from major conservative figures from the administration, they really mark a clear break from earlier, more absolutist stances on free speech.
Yeah, and this isn't just some abstract political debate, is it? It feels like a real test, as Adam Goldstein put it, of public tolerance for political differences in a country that's already, quote, dangerously splintered. Oh. That line between speech that's protected and speech that gets punished, it's being redrawn very aggressively, not just through laws, but through public shaming, economic pressure, the strategic use of social media. And that has very real, tangible consequences for people's lives and for the health of the democratic process overall.
And maybe that leaves us with this final thought, something for you, the listener, to mull over. In this climate where calls for unity often come alongside these really severe threats of punishment for hate speech, for dissent, what kind of unity is actually possible? And when free speech principles seem to be applied so selectively, defended fiercely for allies, but used as a weapon against opponents, what does that ultimately mean for the long-term health of civil discourse? For that fundamental right we have to express unpopular ideas in America, it really forces us to ask if true freedom of expression can even survive when its boundaries seem so shifting and maybe so politically convenient.